Hey guys, thank you so much for joining the show. I do want to ask you, please donate to Tulsi Gabbard's campaign. She's getting close to that 65,000 needed in order to join the debates, but she's not quite there yet. And even if she's not your number one pick, I do think that you should still donate to her campaign in order to get her on that debate stage, because we need a lot more voices than the people that have already been, that have already met the quota to get on the stage. Of course, the big names have already done it, and Andrew Yang has already made the quota, so has Pete Buttigieg. So we really need to get Tulsi Gabbard on that stage. And I do have the link to her campaign down below. She needs 65,000 individual donations to make that stage, to get her voice heard. And I do think that an anti-war message, an anti-interventionist message is absolutely needed. People need to hear this message. So please donate to her campaign if you haven't yet. A buck will do. I mean, anything will do. In order to get that 65,000 unique individual donors. So you can't do it over and over and over again as an individual. You can only do it one time. But get all your friends and family to also do it one time. Okay, let's take a look at some of the stuff that's gone on today and I guess also a little bit yesterday in the news. First of all, it took one mass shooting. New Zealand has now banned assault weapons. Just like that. So Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern last Friday vowed that our gun laws will change, and now they have. So what they've done is they're banning all military-style semi-automatic and assault rifles, and the country's also creating a buyback scheme to confiscate the banned weapons. So a big question people are having is how are they able to do this? And why is it that whenever we have a mass shooting here in the United States, the response is thoughts and prayers, and we go into this gun debate and nothing ever gets done? Well, New Zealand has it's a few things, but first of all, New Zealand has a parliamentary system, so the party in power can get things done pretty quickly. Secondly, they don't have the NRA lobbying their government. Here in the United States, in order to get a gun law passed, you've got to get through so many layers. You have to have the majority of the House. You have to have 60% of the Senate. You, of course, have to have the person in the White House on board. And then on top of it, you've got to contend with all of the money that's being poured into our political system by the NRA. So even though there is a big consensus amongst Americans that we do want to have our gun laws change, it's really difficult to do. You've got the vocal minority that they're very, the people that do not want the gun laws to change. They're very active. They show up to vote. They call their politicians. The people that maybe have the consensus, which I think is the majority of Americans that would like to see our gun laws change, just don't have the fire to really make that happen. A lot of them don't. So, I think it's changing. After each time we have a mass shooting in the United States, I do think that people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, we really need to make some change. I think after Parkland, we saw a big rise in that, but it's still not enough to combat the NRA and the people who are very much gun lovers. And also, the United States has a very unique history when it comes to gun laws and just gun culture in general. And I think that needs to be understood, why we have the gun culture we have. Where did it stem from? Why do these other nations not have the Second Amendment, for example? I think we're one of only 3 nations with the Second Amendment. It's the United States, Mexico, and Guatemala that are the only countries with the right to bear arms. There were more. I believe there were 6 other countries that had the right to bear arms, but they've changed those rules. And for our nation, something that makes us different than, let's say, Canada or Australia or New Zealand is, first of all, they didn't have to raise up arms against the British Empire. We did. They were granted their sovereignty through other means. They didn't need to go through a revolutionary war. The U.S. colonies actually had to fight the greatest empire in the world in order to gain sovereignty. So that's part of the history there of why that was baked into the Constitution, and also the fact that the United States was expanding west. And as the United States, settlers were moving westward, they were met with resistance from tribes, and they were under attack. They were attacking and under attack, and so the forefathers baked it into the Constitution that you had the right to bear arms. So we have this different culture that stemmed from that. And then, of course, what's risen from that since then has been the NRA And, I think that you can definitely make some arguments that we don't necessarily need those laws anymore because we're not moving westward. We're not constantly under attack. We're not fighting the great empire. We are the empire. But I think an understanding of where this stems from, and I think it would help the debate for everybody if we can kind of come to an understanding of the historical reasons for the guns and the implications. And also one thing to note is that these countries like New Zealand and also in Switzerland, now Switzerland has a really heavy gun culture. They banned handguns long ago. Like in New Zealand, you can't have a handgun unless you're part of a pistol club. And in Switzerland, you can't have handguns unless you can go to the government and say, I really, really need one because I'm a security guard that's transporting diamonds, or you have a threat against your life and you really need it for protection. And then they make you actually recertify that gun every 9 months. So it's interesting. We do need to take a look at our laws and figure out what we can do. And me saying that, I'm in the majority of people. We all agree on this. We just can't get it done because our political system is set up a certain way. So that's that. But they were able to they did away with their assault weapons in mere moments. That's New Zealand. Okay, moving on here. Trump signed an executive order to protect free speech on college campuses. So this was mainly obviously free speech is protected by the Constitution. So obviously universities are, they have to adhere to the Constitution of the United States. So really this executive order was a symbol executive order. Basically, it's saying that the colleges that are going to be receiving federal grants have to sign off and certify that they are adhering to free speech laws of free speech laws of the land. Now, I understand why he did this because I agree. I do believe that free speech is under attack. I think that we're seeing this not only on college campuses where controversial, specifically, especially in the era that we're in right now. Now, it always wasn't this way, and I don't know if it always will be this way, but the era we're in right now, it's that these conservative talkers would go to these campuses like Laura Ingraham or Milo Yiannopoulos, or I know that Ben Shapiro has said that he's had moments like this, and Dave Rubin, and you get these conservative talkers and they show up to these college campuses and they essentially get run off. There's protests and riots, or they're told that they can't come and speak because they create too much violence. Which makes no real sense. I mean, obviously, the people that are coming to the campus to speak are not the ones creating the violence. That would be the people who are opposing them creating the violence. But because of that, they end up banned from speaking. And there has been a big push to get people to say, there's been a big conservative push that wants that to change, which I agree, it should change. And so Trump signs this executive order. Now, we also see that conservatives are being banned on social media sites, Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube apparently. But I feel like on YouTube, the conservative talkers are definitely more prominent than us progressive talkers. So, and I personally experienced some sort of censorship a little bit on YouTube, but that's happening, I think, more on the social network platforms, but he's not signing executive orders to stop that. The only thing that he can really do is kind of control the money, the grants that are going into the college campuses. So it's definitely interesting. What I would like to see is look, I am a free speech advocate, so I do advocate for the rights of conservative talkers that I do not agree with to speak their mind. And if audiences want to hear them, fine. I agree with that. But when the time comes, which I'm sure it will, when liberal talkers are being banned, when liberal talkers are being shouted down, I would hope that those who are standing up for the free speech of conservatives will also be standing up for the free speech of liberals. Because, like I said, in today's era, it might be the conservatives that seem to be under attack, but it wasn't always this way. It was often the liberals. It was often liberal voices who had radical ideas talking about gay marriage, talking about a woman's right to choose, talking about all of these radical ideas of having civil liberties in our nation. Those were once shouted down, and those were once ideas that were banned. So I would hope that in the future that these conservative talkers come to the rescue of the liberals, as many of us liberals are coming to their rescue as well. James Comey wrote an article in the New York Times saying he doesn't want Trump to be impeached. So he basically said, hey, listen, Congress, I mean, look, if you find something and you want to go through with it, I guess go through with it. But he says that he doesn't want them to. He thinks that it would be bad and it would be very divisive, which I agree with him. I do think it would actually further divide the nation. This is what he says. He's talking specifically about Mueller's report, which is set to be released any day now. Comey says that he would like to see maximum transparency, which the House actually passed a resolution stating that they would also like it to be publicly released. And it was unanimous. It was Republicans and Democrats. Everybody, it was, I think, 420 to nothing voted for maximum transparency of the report. Everybody wants to see it, including James Comey. He says, yeah, I think everybody should be able to see it. And he says, quote, I have no idea whether the special counsel will conclude that Mr. Trump knowingly conspired with the Russians in connection with the 2016 election or that he obstructed justice with the required corrupt intent. Comey wrote, I also don't care. I care only that the work be done well and completely. He also said, quote, I don't mean that Congress shouldn't move ahead with the process of impeachment governed by our Constitution. If Congress thinks the provable facts are there, I just hope it doesn't, he said, because if Mr. Trump were removed from office by Congress, a significant portion of this country would see that as a coup, and it would drive those people farther from the common center of American life, more deeply fracturing our country. I agree with him on that. I don't think it's a good idea. It would only fire up the Trump supporting base. It would get them to feel like they were wronged in some way or robbed of something in some way. They're never going to agree that Trump deserves to be impeached. It's just a bad way to go. It's better to put forward a good candidate in 2020 and beat him, as Greg Gutfeld said on Fox and not Fox and Friends. It was what's that show that he's on Fox? It's the The Five, and he said, "Don't try to cheat the guy, beat the guy." And I agree. That's exactly what needs to happen. All right. Lastly, for you in the roundup of the news, and then we'll move on to the 2020 election news because there's a lot going on there as well. Trump says it's time for the U.S. to recognize Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights. So he tweeted out saying it's time for the U.S. to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the region. He says, quote, after 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability. So if you don't know about this region, it's kind of sitting up on a hill. It was captured from Syria during the Six-Day War of 1967. It was formally annexed in 1981. It's never been recognized as part of Israel by the international community. And even though the Israelis have been creating settlements in Golan Heights, that has been considered illegal under international law. So the United States has kind of had the policy to not recognize it as part of Israel, as a sovereign part of Israel. And like moving our embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, this is just another signal from the Trump administration to favor Israel. And really, we've been holding out because we want to see a peace treaty between Israel and the Palestinians. And so we've tried to stay neutral, but not since the Trump administration. He's handing Netanyahu a couple of wins. Now, Netanyahu is up for re-election in like 3 weeks. And he's set to actually come visit the White House in a couple of days. So Trump has really high approval ratings in Israel. They really love him over there. And Netanyahu is up for re-election. So this was just like a political gift. And I mean, he didn't really need another political gift. He already got one when the United States decided to move the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. That was a big political gift to Netanyahu because he gets to turn around to his people and say, hey, look what I've done. I was able to get the United States to move the embassy to Jerusalem to recognize that as the capital of Israel. And now, look, I got the United States to recognize Golan Heights as part of our sovereignty. So yay for me. And, he gets reelected, most likely. So that is what's going on there. Now, Golan Heights, look, I'm not going to pick sides on this, but I will just say that if you were Israel, you'd want this area too, because it does sit up on a hill and it's looking down at Israel. So from a strategic military perspective, you don't really want your enemy to be able to prop itself up on that hill and point weapons at you. So I can understand their desire for the region. So that, that's that. Anyway, well, I guess that's the news that I've got for you, the wrap up of the big stuff that happened over the last day. I do want to move on to the 2020 election coverage stuff because there's a lot going on there, including Joe Biden saying that he might be naming Stacey Abrams as his vice president pick right out of the gate. We're going to talk about that next.